Hello. So today I wanted to talk about what's the point. This is basically something that I was thinking about yesterday. Kind of like it occurred to me, like if I die, right now, like, what exactly, what would be the point of all of this? And I think that when you're trying to find meaning, you can do that, through a lot of like different ways. There are a lot of like different mindsets. There's, lots of different religions. There's, a lot of for you to find meaning. And I think the way that I think, I don't necessarily think that there is a meaning to, anything. And it usually works for me, but it was kind of like on a religious context that yesterday I think that I was because my parents, they're religious, so they have like this outlook on life in which like things, there's kind of like a reason why things happen. Like maybe they will never figure out, like, in their life, during their lives, like why is that some things happen, but there is still a point. And for them, as I said, like they're religious, so it has to do with like their purpose has to do with, God and Jesus and all that. I don't really believe in any higher power, so for me there isn't really inherently any meaning. But I think I wonder, like, do I want meaning, and what can I make it be? Because there's so many things that are happening in our lives that we can kind of like benefit from one way or another. Benefit in the sense of like we can be enriched, we can have kind of like these fulfilling experiences, and you can kind of like look at them and see them as being the point. Because I think that it might be kind of like a human thing for us to find meaning in things. And as I said, there's several different ways that you can get to that point, but you kind of like have to figure out like which one is the best for you. Because I don't know, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's like the whole thing of like a deity does not have to exist for like to have like power over people. So like in a certain way you could argue that like every deity does exist because it impacts, it influences the way that people live their lives. So they exist in that sense, in this kind of cultural osmosis, sense. And as I said, like that is not really something that makes sense to me, but it did get me thinking about, because the problem with like this sentence, like what's the point, is that historically it has been something that I have thought when I was going through some bad situations, like when I was struggling to kind of like make sense out of life and of everything. So like the question, it just very quickly derails into why am I here, like why am I making this effort, why am I struggling, like I don't have to struggle. Basically, I don't have to like there's a kind of like a way out, which is not what I want. I want to keep on living. I want to kind of like keep I want to keep existing. I want to keep on doing the things that I love. I finally found a major that I'm invested in, so like I want to keep working on this. I have my writing, and if I find it to be very fulfilling, and I want to finish this novel. I want to finish the next novels, and I don't know what future holds for me, but I don't have to know. I can just live my life and welcome things as they kind of like happen, as they come to pass. And that is ultimately like the best you can do some days, like because you're not going to find fulfillment every single day of your life. There are going to be many days when you're kind of like just being tossed around and not really, yeah, like it just kind of like completely confused about everything, anything and everything. And I think it's important for you to kind of like be able to suspend like your search for a deeper meaning, because those days you're not gonna find it. So just focus on like getting through the day, and then later the next day after, or maybe like the week after, you go back to like kind of to assessing things. But like as I said, like there's no right or wrong way of doing things, but like different ways of doing things, they will beget different outcomes. There are different things that are going to happen depending on how you approach life. And like what does this mean for me specifically right now is that I kind of like I need more anchors. I think I feel like whenever I start getting these thoughts of like what's the point, it's kind of like a trigger. It triggers something in my head. It's kind of like fight or flight response. And it's usually been fight. Like I'm kind of like really adamant on kind of like what I'm doing, but it can also be flight. I think that like the craving death is in itself kind of like it is you kind of like fly, it is, you're fleeing the scene, so that is, something interesting to think about, because I usually see myself as a person who, like, when there's a situation, a fight or flight situation, I usually fight. But now that I think about it this way, it really does seem that there's a lot of like fleeing for my part. And sometimes, like, fleeing is, the best outcome, because you're staying there and fighting, like, it's not going to change anything, and you're just gonna get yourself hurt. So you don't want that. I mean, you shouldn't want that, because sometimes you have self-destructive tendencies, and there's no, yeah, I mean, there's no right way of dealing with it, but there is kind of like a wrong way of dealing with it. And the wrong way would be kind of like giving up on everything, and that is, as I said, like, this is not where I want to be. And it's interesting because, like, I start asking myself, like, what's the point? And I end up finding that there's like a lot of things for me to kind of like keep on living for. There are a lot of things that I want, because once I'm gone, there's nothing after that. If you believe that there's something, like, you do you, it doesn't bother me or anything, but I kind of know that there is nothing afterwards. And so I think that is in itself kind of like a reason for you to keep going, because you can kind of like take away your own life, like, at any point in time. So just press for a little longer, just try to go through this day, and just it's going to be, sometimes it's hard for you to kind of get through the day, but just think smaller. Don't think about, I have to kind of like handle this today. Think about what I'm gonna do in the next hour, and then that's too much, next minutes too much, next second. And I find that like seconds, they're kind of like they're calming in a way, because they pass quickly. So like, if I wait for 5 seconds, it's 5 seconds in which I haven't taken drastic measures, so that is something that I yeah, like, that is something that I have. I know it's kind of like a victory. It's a small victory, but it's a victory nonetheless. And sometimes we need the small victories to keep going. Sometimes you need, for example, I just finished, the PowerPoint presentation for an assignment that I have due next Monday, and I still have to do the written part, but that one I think is going to be easier, because I really spend time on my PowerPoint presentations. I want them to be interesting and engaging, so there's a lot of like time that I spend on making sure that everything is working out, and like the written part is just more straightforwardly the text. So basically, I'm gonna do this written part, and then there is like my part for the project, do like next Tuesday, not tomorrow, like for next week. I have assignments to present on like Monday through Wednesday, and then there is the presentation for us to kind of like work on. And it is an interview, and we already have half of the interview. We'll just have to wait for the rest. And I am basically working on the PowerPoint presentation, so I want to kind of like make some progress. And like our interviewee, she was going to finish responding, finishing like the questions. She's sending audios on WhatsApp, so we have to transcribe it as well, but that's not the point. I'm going to focus on kind of like working on the presentation, and then later we kind of like focus on that. I focus on that. But yeah, so I finished like this presentation, and I'm really proud of it. So that is something that is kind of like fueling me. So for like the other 3 things that I have to do, the 3 school related things I have to do, I'm going to feel kind of like energized to kind of like keep it going, keep working on it. So yeah, so sometimes like finishing something makes you want to finish more things, and also it doesn't make you only want, it makes you kind of like believe that you can finish more things, because like when you're struggling to get through something, it really feels sometimes that you can't really, that things feel too insurmountable. It feels like that there's no end in sight, there's no way for you to kind of like succeed. You're kind of like stuck in this limbo. So I'm kind of I'm kind of like thinking I don't know, like I think this is a strategy that you can have, like small victories. Make sure you do something, even if it's kind of like small, make sure you finish that and then you move on. So yeah, so I'm going to be pretty busy this week, between school and work and my writing and saving the my videos on my external drive. It really like I don't know, but I think that this might be a good thing for me because I think that maybe yeah, I think that one thing is going to end up like it's kind of like a thread, and like one thing is going to end up pulling the other. So at least this is how I'm expecting things to go down. But yeah, so something else that I wanted to talk about, not something else, continuing the thing about what's the point. As I said, like I don't need there to be a point. Like it is something that you can survive, but I don't know. I think that it might be easier to live life when you have like a purpose. When you think that there's a reason for you to live, because you have like that as an anchor. It's a very potent anchor for you to have. Naturally, people despair. It's not really something. It's not new. And I think since the dawn of humanity, like that has been happening, people have been whatever. Because there's also a lot of like survival in the beginning. There's a lot of like of us, just struggling to exist with everything being dangerous and everything being kind of like a threat. And I don't envy that, I don't want to go back to that stage, but it is undeniable that when you are like that, I mean, it's not good for your head because you're tense all the time, but like it is kind of, I don't know, like your head is full all the time, so there's no time for you to think silly things, or like dangerous things. So there is, like that particular, like that's a take that you can have. That which is why like I kind of like I see why people have like a belief system. I mean, like we all have a belief system, it just changes from person to person. But a lot of like my belief system is like the absence of a belief, of like different, yeah, like that there's nothing there. And as I said, like it works for me. I don't, because that's the thing, it's ultimately about what you believe in. So I don't think that I could be any different than I am right now, because like right now what I think is derived from the way I think. So I would have to undergo like a tremendous change for like these things to generally shape me into like being someone else, or thinking differently from what I think right now. And I don't think that that is happening. I mean, I'm saying pretty much I know that isn't happening, but I don't want to be pessimistic because maybe something is going to happen. Because as I said, deities, like they believe they exist in a way, even if like they don't exist like physically. Like they have an impact on society and culture, and they guide the way that people carry themselves, the way that they vote, for example. So naturally there is like power there. There is something. It is more of it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. That's pretty much how I see some things sometimes. It is like it has to do with this this reality in which sometimes people say like this is going to happen, because I'm back. I thought my mom had called me. She had not. But what I was saying is that you kind of like you believe that something is your purpose, something like talking for example about your profession. So you kind of like you spend time and effort into that, and then you succeed at, for example, graduating in that topic, and then you succeed at finding a job in that area, and you find yourself being very fulfilled. And to me, when I look at that, I see the impact of like that belief. But like that could have existed regardless. Like that could have happened regardless. You could have a different religion and still have the same outcome. You could have like no religion at all, and that would still happen. And that is so that's pretty much what I mean. Like sometimes you have this guidance that this is going to happen. This is your path, the path for you. And basically I yeah, like so you end up like you make the effort to kind of like make that happen. So it is a positive self-fulfilling prophecy, because you feel like you have this thing prophesied, so like make the effort to get there naturally. I think that this might be something that has something to do with like the way that I see my life, because I really believed I had a calling, that there was something that I was being kind of like summoned to do. And when I look back today, I can see it, and I'm like, yeah, like I basically, those are the things that I wanted for myself. And because I was invested in religion, I kind of like I made it seem as if like that was kind of like my holy purpose, when it was not. It was just something I wanted. So I do have this disillusionment experience, yeah, because as I said, like that never really happened. And I mean, there's also like the fact that like the way that I was approaching the situation, because one way or another, I basically I know, I think that I was living too much in my head. Like I was kind of like stuck like in my head. So I wasn't making, I could have done more to kind of like make that wish, that desire come true. I don't think that what I wanted specifically would ever happen, because what I wanted was it was too much, it was too big, and there's only one me, and I don't really have the access, I didn't really have the opportunities, so it was kind of like hard to kind of like for that to have happened. But in a smaller scale it could have, because also like I wanted so many things, and also like those chances, they got so specific, they grew into these scenarios where like I needed these very specific things. And it's also interesting because it has to do with my head, but also with things that I was kind of like experiencing, things that were happening in my life that were kind of like affecting me. So it was an interesting scenario for me to kind of like find myself. There were some interesting conundrums. I think some of them, like I feel I'm like embarrassed about them at this point in time, because it's just like so many things that I felt like I got so invested, and they had absolutely no bearing on my life. I was kind of like, like I was, by getting invested, I was helping, like other, like people, I was making other people richer. That's kind of like, like the situation. And I don't really know what there is to, as I said, like, if I could choose, I look back at those fantasies I had, and like which if I could choose one aspect of it, or one of the fantasies, like which one would I choose? And it's kind of like embarrassing when I think about what I would have said back in the day, because on one hand, like I was very invested in hold up, because on one hand I was very invested in things that were happening around me, pop culture moments, things happening in politics and economics, and social issues and all that. And I think that I think I've talked about this before, but I don't think like I'll fit into a hero mode if like my life was a book, because I would definitely make this choose the selfish thing. I would make a selfish choice. I would kind of like choosing my own enrichment, like also like, I mean, like not only improvements and all that, but also monetary things, over making the world a better place. I don't know, I think that I have an immediate capacity to kind of like be to not be selfish. But if I'm being honest, I know what I would choose. But but the embarrassing part, to me, is that I would kind of like I would choose other people, because I talked about before how I really struggle with commitment, and that was something that happened in my real life. People I was meeting IRL, but also online. Like there was, I was never really invested in any fandom, because I wanted. Sometimes I was very invested in a piece of piece of media, a piece of content, and that was something very important to me. But I would never really engage with like the community, because I didn't. That would involve me having to admit that like I'm a part of this community, and I didn't really want to do that. But at the same time, like I was really attached to certain things. I was very, very much invested, and some of those things I'm embarrassed, to say like, well, I really was into that. Like that is kind of, silly. But some of those things are just like, why? Because I think that when I think about myself when I was 18, I was still figuring myself out. I think that the direction, like where I would land, is very clear. That like I would land where I am at, today, thinking about my mindset and the things, my beliefs, my morals, everything. So basically, I was very invested. Yeah, so yeah, like when I look at myself, I feel like, yeah, obviously I ended up in this place, but I was still struggling with some of the ideas that were presented to me when I was a kid. So some of like the beliefs I had, which were impacted by religion. As I said, my parents are Christian. I was raised Christian, and I didn't even call myself a Christian for certain periods of time. And right now, like I don't have any embarrassment for that, because like naturally, like the things that you were taught, like they really make an impact. And I didn't want to acknowledge that when I was a kid. I wanted to feel like everything I thought was like an original idea, an original thought that I had, and that wasn't impacted by anyone and everyone. But like that is impossible. We're all molded by like the things that we kind of like introduced at like this young age. Like there are things we'll have to fight certain things. Like there's this rejection of like of what if what we kind of like are introduced to like is harmful to us. Like there is that kind of like that rejection. And that is something that, because I'm thinking about 2019, which at this point was almost, I'm thinking about middle of the year. So yeah, we're almost in the middle of the year, so like almost 7 years. And it's kind of crazy how I was still very hesitant to fully embrace myself, like what I thought, what I believed in, even though, as I said, that was the natural progression. When you look at the things that mattered to me, the things that I valued when I was a kid and a teenager, like yeah, where I ended up ending, like it makes perfect sense. But like while I was going through it, it was something that I didn't necessarily I think that politics is a good example, because that like I wasn't able, I'm thinking this was like back in 2019, I wasn't able to fully say out loud what I really thought, what my beliefs were, because there were these preconceived notions that were kind of like infused into my head when I was a kid, and I didn't want to be that. There's certain stereotypes, there's certain ideas, and there's so many things that I didn't care about. But then there were so many things that that is interesting, because there are things that I cared about back then, but I don't care about them anymore. Like it's one of those things that it is many of those things that they're no longer I don't know, like there used to be like these pressing issues, and like they are not really here anymore. I don't really care about like the way that things happen. There are things that I kind of like try to avoid, because like those are conversations and discussions that don't really add anything. Much to the contrary, they just they detract from like your stability. From this case, for my stability. But I don't know. Yeah, so back to what is the point. I don't know, I don't have like an answer, and the thing is, like, I don't think I need to have an answer, but I think I'm flirting with the idea of finding purpose in different areas, because I am doing things, I am working towards my future. So like when I like college is a way for me to work on my future. My writing, there is an element of, you could argue, of it, like for me working on my future when that comes. But I don't know, there's no right or wrong answer, but it does feel like there are some wrong answers, but like what is right. And I don't know, I think there are also some right answers that would be wrong. No, yeah, they're just wrong. So right answers, wrong answers, ultimately, like you have to look internally. And I think that like my assessment of this is being very situational, and I'm kind of like there are a lot of like things that I'm failing to consider, and there's nothing wrong with um there's nothing wrong with like not knowing. I think as long as you're making progress, or you're working towards something, you'll be okay. Because ultimately that's what I want, right? I want to ask what's the point, and then have an answer that isn't like dangerous. an answer that isn't harmful. And I think that, like today, it is kind of like it is happening today. Like everything is kind of like in place. But what happens when, I get unstable? What happens in those moments? Because that is pretty much where I'm kind of like afraid that, something might happen. And as I said, yeah, like there are many wrong answers. There are many wrong ways of, making things happen. I am very, I can be very skeptical of, people and of situations, of institutions, of ideas, of ideologies. I think that this is kind of the norm for me, which goes back to the whole commitment issues. I kind of like, even if I fully believe something, I kind of sometimes don't want to engage, or I don't want to kind of like compromise. Not compromise. I don't want to commit to a certain idea. I don't want to kind of like label myself that way. Uh, Nothing wrong with labels. I think that they can be very helpful, but I am finding myself at a point where I'm like, I don't care so much for them, in the sense that like I think this way, I am this way, and if like whatever like this implies, whatever this entices, that's it. But I don't necessarily have to kind of like, I don't have to figure out, because for example, when you're studying philosophy, there are many, different people that you're going to study, and there are many different names that people give to, certain ideas, that people had certain, like ideologies and all that. So basically what I'm trying to say is that I'm looking at the ideas, I'm looking at the ideologies, and I'm like attaching myself to like, yeah, this makes sense to me, this doesn't, this is what I would, like this is how I'm going to live my life, and this is, like something that doesn't make sense to me. So what I'm trying to say is that like I'm looking at, the description, and I'm like attaching myself to, but I'm not saying that, that's not, I'm not saying that that's my label. Not because I have anything, against the labels, or there's nothing necessarily wrong with them, but it's just that I don't really need them. I think that if I want to be, I don't mind being labeled as something, like if that is kind of like how people they navigate the world, like go for it. I don't really care, but I don't know, I'm not here trying to preach. Basically, as when I was younger, I was constantly trying to have conversations and discussions, and trying to educate people, and these days I don't care too much about that. I'm just trying to survive, trying to kind of like live one day at a time, and focusing on the things that on my anchors, focusing on the things that have meaning. So I ask myself again, what's the point? And the answer is whatever I make of it. Like I can choose, and it doesn't have to be kind of like an answer, a final answer forever. Like I can change my mind every day. I can change, the tune. Depending on how like I change, how things change for me. Because also like you have different priorities. For example, I was working on my assignment, and when I was working in this PowerPoint presentation, I was that was kind of like my goal. If you ask me, like that's pretty much what I want to do. I want to conclude this, I want to finish this, and then basically then I kind of like I finished that. So what's the goal right now? I'm making this video, and then once I'm done with this, what will I do? I have other assignments. I have my book. I have like the external drive, external hard drive, external HD, HD, okay, that was embarrassing. But yeah, so that is kind of like where I am at right now. So what's the point? There are many points, and you can rank them. I think that I'll have fun ranking the things that like what is the point? I could argue that it is me finishing my novels, like finishing this one, and then there's going to be the next one, and then one after that, and life is going to be, I don't know, like there's nothing wrong with not I don't know, like because this is something that's been kind of like on my head a lot lately. I've been like consuming a lot of content that is regards like storytelling, and how to write, and like seeing things that don't work, and that has been helpful for me, because I'm trying to do better, but it does make me look at the past of what is already out there, and like, oh yeah, that was kind of bad, and then I look at what I have presently, and it's also the same. I think that I have been able to improve. On this third novel, it's better, going to be better than the second one, but it still is kind of like a long way to come, particularly because this kind of like exists in a vacuum. Like my novels, they're out there, they're public, but I don't have an audience, and it's not like I'm making an effort to have an audience, and I think part of it has to do with fear. I think I'm embarrassed. Not that I'm embarrassed. I don't know. I'm not embarrassed of my novel, but I think I am embarrassed of like how some of like the things about it, like the aspects and the way that story was construed, and some of the chapters and all that. And there's also, so yeah, like there's a fear of failure too, and also like I don't feel like what I have. I don't know how to properly explain it, because on one hand I'm like, this is not good enough for me to just feel the urge to just be out there and like go consume this. I think that I would need external help for me to get to that point. But at the same time, I'm like I'm proud of what I accomplished. I'm proud of like what I've written. It is something that really I don't know. What I was thinking, like, what's the point of this? And once again, it doesn't have to have a point. And I think that particularly regarding my writing, like the point is like personal enrichment. It's kind of like fulfilling myself. With the fact that I kind of like accomplished something. That the fact that something is yeah, but like not only just like anything. I'm happy and proud of what I have. But yeah, so what's the point? It depends. What's the point of like college, what I'm trying to accomplish? And I talked about this before. For many years I was studying and kind of like aimlessly because I wasn't really invested in the area, and right now I finally found something. So like what's the point? Learning, finding a good job, finding like a purpose like in my profession, because I mentioned this before, I'm trying to not define myself based on academics and my professional life, but that is kind of like a huge part of our days. So I do have to kind of like, there's some progress, something has to happen, and I kind of like I want to become a better professional. I want to, first of all, I'm not even like a professional yet. I'm on my first semester, so there is still like 7 semesters. There are 7.5 semesters to go, but yeah, like I think I'll survive. I think that I'll be able to continue. I think that there is something here for me to yeah, something for me to attach myself to. So yeah, I don't want work to be the most important thing in my life, but I do want to derive some satisfaction from it. So basically, yeah, life is good, and I'm kind of I think I'm on the right track. Like even if it turns out like I don't want to do this anymore, like there is time to restart. I think that because of the way that I was so set in my ways when I was younger, I thought that like there was only one path for me, and if that path didn't work out, there was like nothing left. Like that was the one thing. And what I find, like what I find in myself these days is that I realize that like if I wish when I when I'm 40, let's say I realize that that right now is so fulfilling, and it's kind of like working, I'm kind of like working towards something, like it's no longer the thing. I can start over. Like there's no limitations on like the amount of times that you can pivot, and I'll be okay. I think that I had this very claustrophobic feeling when things started like not to work out, because in my head I think that I was like, this is the way, it's the only way, so if this doesn't work out, like nothing else will. So yeah, it's one of those things that I'm basically I'm yeah I can change. Like things can change, and I will survive. There's no need to despair, and sometimes things are easier said than done. So there's that. And because I'm talking big, like okay, I can pivot, but like in practice, pivot to what? I have no idea. But at the same time, I also didn't have any idea of like, this. I'm majoring in, I think it's called archival sciences. In Portuguese, we call it arqueologia, which is just like to archaeology. So archival sciences was not really what I had in mind for myself, and yet I'm really liking this, course so far. I'm invested, and I'm thinking about, the future in a way that isn't overwhelming, that isn't really making me feel like I have to suppress, my fears. Because, what's the point of this? What's the point? Basically, it's very loaded with fear. It's very loaded. Sometimes it can be loaded with anger, but like for myself right now, like I think that fear is a big one. What's the point? Whatever you want it to be, it depends. Like it can change, as I said. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't feel scared right now. I'm talking about these things, which shows that I'm kind of like healed in a certain way. Because if I was talking about this a couple years ago, I would almost panic. Like the lack of knowledge of what where I would be going from. Like where I was at. It's yeah. Those I was placing a lot of pressure. Like on what was happening. So basically, because I think that I ended up projecting. I think this is something that happened a lot. I think for so many years, like my writing was kind of like the, thing that was carrying me. So I felt like I needed to conclude it. I needed to kind of like change to make, like an effort, just project everything that I had onto that. But I wasn't finishing it, so I felt, a little dejected for sure, but also I felt like things were not working out for me, even though like that is just like one of the many things that I do in life. Although I will say that maybe the issue is that I wasn't doing that many things at that point in time, so every little thing that threatened like that kind of stability, I took it very personally. I think this is something I was talking about, how I was embarrassed about some of the hills I died on, back in 2016 when I was 18. I think of one specifically that I'm like, I am thinking, I'm gonna get to that point, where I want to get, solely so I can, say something about this topic, so it was like me and my goals, they were surrounding like this other person, this other entity, and who right now I don't even support, and who I regret supporting. So it was this thing of I would get so angry. And I think when in my older channels, like in the ones that I had before this, something that I would often get to is the fact that I could really relate to my dad, but usually regarding like some negative things. So he doesn't, I tried to get him to do therapy for the longest time, but wasn't working out, so I kind of gave up. But like basically something that would happen is that he kind of like has this thing where he bites his fingers. It is self-harm, I told him, but he's like, no, it's not. But he's harming his fingers, are all calloused from like the biting. And I wouldn't bite my fingers, but I would have like those moments where I would kind of like blame myself. I remember this one specific situation. I was standing against my wardrobe right there, and I was like pointing at the imaginary things, like I'm saying like kind of like a list of things. And this once again goes back to like why I'm so invested in this thing of this person who I don't know, this person who should not mean anything to me. And like this conflict, particularly because like at that point I was being kind of like defensive of the situation, but it's a situation that was worth being criticized, that it was worth the criticism. And I don't know, it's kind of like interesting because how like people, like we exist in multitudes, like there's like a lot of like different things to us. We're all very complex, part of like being a human being. But I'm thinking about like how I can have some of the same ideas, that I had these ideas also when I was back then. I was in denial about the fact that what I had going on wasn't really helpful to me. Like I was kind of like defending, like what came before me, like defending the notions that I had been taught instead of like the notions that I came to the conclusion that like they made sense. So it was very contradictory behavior. Like I'm thinking about also a situation back in 2010. It was before the pandemic. I think it was like February, and I remember talking to these friends that I had. We went. We were talking about basically it was a mix of politics and religion, and it was one of the first times that I generally said out loud that I didn't really believe what I was supposed to believe, what I had been brought up to believe, and it was an important moment, so much so that I remember it to this day. But it was so unexpected. I didn't expect for us to start having a conversation like that. I didn't expect us, myself to kind of like finally say that. And it changed something in me because I think that I was still conflicted internally. I was still, I was kind of like halfway there and halfway, like I was one step, into like the way that I think, my thinking independently. And, one step, was kind of like still in the ideas that I was brought up to believe. And I it's kind of like crazy how sometimes because it kind of like it started something. It was not because December or November 2019 is when I finally I officially left religion, but I hadn't. And I told my parents I had to sit them down, to come out as an atheist. And it reminded me of like the last time that I had sat down to talk to them about something like that, and it was regarding my sexuality, and it was kind of like a mixed bag. Like it was. I feel like for so many years I felt really, really embarrassing about the whole situation because technically I didn't talk. I talked to my dad and then I talked to my mom, and it was a whole thing. It's kind of like interesting. I'm thinking about my mom, how like there's this duality because like right now we never really had a bad relationship, but after that traumatic situation when I was 13, I pushed everybody away, including my parents. So I think that because we were a little bit more distant, she didn't really get where I was coming from regarding certain situations, and that ended up making a difference in the way that she sometimes would react and respond to things. So there are some moments where she's just not really an angry person. I don't think I've ever seen my mom get like angry the way that my dad gets every other day. Although like he's working on that, and I think he's getting better. But so sometimes I would say things, and just being situations in the past where she said careless things to what I said, and it really hurt me and it really affected me. But there were these moments where I kind of like I saw a level of as I said, like it was angry according to her. As I said, it's different from like the way that my dad gets angry. It's kind of like explosive and all that. Hers is there is anger. As I said, she's angry, so there's anger, but it's much more contained, and much more, maybe contained is not the word, is more composed. She doesn't lose her composure or anything like that. But yeah, but we did have some situations like that, and but we talked it out, like everything. Like I have no issues, and as I said, these days we have we're very close, emotionally, physically. I constantly tell my parents that I love them, and it's one of those things that sometimes is good for you because I have a friend, Paloma, and she is also affectionate, so it's good to have somebody who kind of like wants to kind of like hug you the most as you want to hug them, and you can tell each other that you love each other, like stuff like that. Like I appreciate having a friend like that. It's also cool if there are other friends that I have that we are not like that, but there's nothing wrong with it because people are different, and it's good for you to find. But I do think that you have to find someone who is kind of like complementary to you, so you can have at least like one person that you can be affectionate with. And that I think that even if I didn't have my friend, like at least I have my parents, so like we have, as I said. So the point is that we are very affectionate with each other. We've always been, but like lately it's been like I think some people who are not in the relationship would call it excessive. I think about it sometimes, like am I saying I love you too much? Because there have been points in time where I was also saying I love you a lot and hugging them, but like there was this distance before. There was, I'm thinking about like what, 2018, 2017, 2018, and I think there was fear. I was kind of like afraid that those like people close to me, they would reject me if they knew me. And it's interesting because like that is a fear that I had that I never voiced, and that I didn't wanna, voice that because I was still kind of like in denial about some things myself. Uh, but it's interesting how like discovering yourself can lead, even if like it's some very small things, it may kind of like have a little revelation of something really small, and kind of like it changes, the whole vibe. It really changes the way that you kind of like you do things. And that is kind of like it's for the best, because it's important for you to change and to adapt into the situations that you have to face on a daily basis, because the idea is for things to become easier. And life is always going to throw stuff at you that is going to make things harder. So like in whatever way you can improve yourself, you can improve your condition, like you should go for it. And sometimes it's going to be although like to be fair, like there's always like a right way and a wrong way of doing things. I would say that's mostly subjective, but I think that sometimes people, they kind of like get attached to their fears, and I'm talking about myself as well. You get attached to your fears, and that gets in the way of you having like an objective assessment of things, because it's kind of hard for you to defend something that is bad for you, but like what's right is right. This is something I wrote in my novel. It was a conversation between two characters, and one of them was kind of like fighting for what would be like the right thing. I don't think both was right or wrong, but like what made more sense. You would say, yeah, that's also subjective. But like the point is that there was a conversation, and like this character was like, yeah, I mean, it is bad for me, but it is the right thing to do. Because it has to do with the whole thing of equality, because people, like if you're kind of like used to a certain thing, it's a saying that I've heard. I haven't heard it in a while, but like I used to hear it a lot. When you're already used to having a certain, reality, whenever people are giving the same rights, like it feels like you're losing something. But that is not the case. But it is a very, it is a point of contention. This is something that like you talk to people about this, and there's going to be 1,000 different things that people are going to say, and like pro it, against it. People who are just like on the wall, on the fence, about it. And there's no right or wrong way to go about it. You just have to make sure that your reasoning is not being guided by fear and by anger and by other negative emotions, because that is not going to help you. Like you're going to find maybe people who are like-minded, and you are going to be able to kind of like commute, congregate with each other. But like if it is based on fear and all that, like you're not going to solve the issue by kind of like just existing, by defending the things that you are defending, because it's never going to be enough. And I say this from experience. I have been afraid of so many different things in my lifetime, and this is something that I can admit right now very freely. But when I was younger, I didn't really admit it. I didn't, like I didn't accept it that I had fear. I wanted to be this fearless person, this fearless leader, this fearless, worker. I don't know. I wanted to be fearless, and I wanted to be leading. And that is another thing. Like if you're kind of like if you're guided by your vanity, and by your ego, like that is also going to make a difference. So you should kind of like be careful with. You should kind of like examine yourself, like from an unbiased perspective. And yes, that is hard, and some people would argue it's impossible. And I kind of like get where you're coming from. But like even if you can be perfectly unbiased, I think by adding like this sort of like detachment, so you can look at your situation more clearly, like there's definitely something like you're going to be better off for it. Because I feel like that the ideal state that we kind of like for us to exist is in this kind of like neutrality. Naturally we have biases, so that is going to impact how we kind of like think, how we vote, for example, how we interact with other people. But I find that it's kind of existing, there's a lot of attachments. I think of like a Velcro surface, and everything that happens to you, everything that happens is like something that you're kind of like attaching to this wall. And what you want is to remove those pieces. Like by the time you're an adult, the wall is already filled to the brim. There's almost nothing that you can do. At least I'm talking about myself. When when I was 18, it was my first year as an adult, legal adult. And I don't think I managed to kind of like remove any of the Velcro tags. I don't think in 2017 I did. I think I did some of them because, for example, I learned that I had ADHD, and that really changed my perspective on myself and, regarding the past. So that was positive. So I was able to remove some tags. But, ultimately, you're going to, it wasn't until, for example, like when I started doing, the EMDR therapy back in the second half of 2022, like that was a therapy that just removed a lot of tags. I didn't remove all the tags, but I had like much, I had much fewer tags. And right now, I think that, these days, like right now is probably, the best I've been, but there are still some tags, that I have to address. And, it's easier said than done, existing, because also, it's not like new tags are going to be added. As I said, the ideal is for you to be completely devoid of tags. But, like new things happen, new fears appear, new anxieties. So, you start adding. But the idea is like you're removing more tags than you're adding. And I think that one way or another, I have been able to improve in that regard. I think that I have like less attachments, less, attachments are not inherently bad. Like that is not what I'm trying to say. It is, attachments can be kind of like strengths, like they can be kind of like the thing of keeping going. Because for example, for the first time in my life this past few months, when I'm thinking about, I'm thinking about my parents and how they're going to feel, because I was always like, to be fair, when I was younger, I was always like, they have another child, they're going to survive, and that is that's not how that works. But also, I think that the whole my friend having passed away, like that really changed perspective, because she was 25, so you see her parents struggling, and and it's a whole thing. So I think that like right now I'm like, I don't want to make my parents suffer. It's not that I didn't care about them, but like usually the weight was so great that I couldn't afford to think about like how people are going to feel, what they're going to be like, and what they're going to feel and all of that. And right now, like, it is something that is kind of like a break. You need like many breaks for you to kind of like hold back like those thoughts. But at the same time, I wonder if I have a moment of instability, if that is going to be enough to stop me. I don't know, but let me not focus on the moments of instability when right now I'm so stable and I'm just like able to do everything. I'm feeling so competent right now. I'm doing like these assignments, I'm working on my novel, I am working, I am I'm doing everything, and that is that is all that I've ever wanted. That's not what I've ever wanted. That's what I've been wanting for the past decade or so. No, I think that the past half decade or so, like I've been just trying to find my footing and find the things that ground me, and I have been able to do that. So once again, what's the point? For me right now specifically, is enjoying myself and finding fulfillment. How can I do that? I can, I don't know, like I'm in this new, like area, and working area. So like finding something there, it would be good. And so that's my writing. As I said, it is very fulfilling, and it takes time and effort. It's very challenging, so that is also good, because I think I need some challenges. I don't need to change the world. It's kind of like where I'm at right now. Like that doesn't have to be part of the point, because when I was 18 and younger, I really thought that I was going to change the world, in a huge way, because you could argue that like you're changing the lives of the people around you, you're changing the world. But I really meant on a very spectacular, magnanimous way, and that is not what happened. And that's right now I don't think that is going to happen. But it's also important to say that I don't feel like I need that, because I think the reason why I wanted to kind of like take over the world was because I was very dissatisfied with myself and with my life. And like right now I have like less attachments, less tags. I'm at this kind of like most honest version of myself, a version that it's kind of like okay with the small things and has kind of like found what is important, because a lot of these things that are important to me right now, they have always been important one way or another. It's just that they were kind of like buried in the terrain of like my superciliousness, of my megalomania. So right now I just want to, what's the point, is enjoying yourself and enjoying each other, enjoying the people. Now people were part of my of like the meaning of my life. And like that's great, because we are social creatures and I have to account for that. So I am not the version of myself that I was when I was 12, but I don't have to be. That's basically kind of like the gist of it. I don't have to. Um, yeah, life. I'll say this, like life will find a way, and I don't mean this as in like, oh, there's a higher power that is making things happen. It's just that ultimately you figure things out. Things work out because you work them out, and I have no reason to believe that I am not going to succeed in the future, because you're gonna figure it out. I have a good support system. I have people to help me out, and I'm no longer proud, too proud to accept help. This is something that I've also been reflecting lately. The fact that I have for so long rejected help, and like right now I'm like, you know what, I'm taking all the help I can get. And but of course, naturally, I'm still maintaining my independence, but I'm kind of more I'm more okay with kind of like people helping me out. And it is interesting how, I don't know, I think that pride used to be a big thing for me. When I got my back tattoo, which is the 7 cardinal sins or vices, the first one that it started was like wrath and pride. Like they were the ones that then ended up being all of them, because I realized that I struggled with all of them. But that was kind of like a big one. And I think that, and that was 2014, 2024, but so 2024, and it's been a couple of years, literally a couple, two. And it's kind of interesting how much I've been able to kind of like improve, not only pride. I think in all the areas, I've been able to kind of like make it. I think gluttony is one that I'm still struggling with it, but like this past week has been good regarding that. So that's it. I'm gonna wrap this up right now. So once again, what's the point? Whatever you want it to be. And what do I want it to be? Enjoyment and fulfillment. And I think that there's probably a third element that I'm forgetting, that we kind of like just wrap this up. But why am I studying? Like that is fulfillment, right? But it's also enjoyment. I enjoy learning these things so far. Things have been good. Why do I write? There is joy, in writing, and there's also fulfillment when you finish, work. Even before you finish it, like, every day when I write something, I'm really proud of myself for, what I've been able to accomplish. Food, although I will say I'm struggling. I'm trying to improve my eating habits, so I am less reliant on food lately, but that's the thing. What else? Tattoos. Tattoos are kind of like an interesting one, because you get so kind of like because it's kind of like your skin, you're not feeling it, so it is interesting. But it is also something that gets me going, and it's also kind of like an interesting ritual in a certain way, because like the tattoos that I've gotten so far, with a few exceptions, like they are usually something that I believe in. They're something that I've learned. They're like a principle, something like they're about how I see the world. So it is kind of like usually it's kind of like also me concluding a chapter. So there's that. What else? I don't know, but all these things, are they enough? Oh, I could add reading, throw reading to the mix. I have to go back to reading. I'm struggling, but like a little progress is better than like no progress at all. That's what I'm trying to say. So, anyways, bye.